please briefly summarize your industry education, professional background, and current role at Reaves?
I am the CEO at Reaves Asset Management. We are an investment manager focused on the, say, energy infrastructure side, mostly on the power and utilities portion, but also dealing with communications and standard energy infrastructure as well. I've been at Reaves for 17 years now, so most of my education has been working here. But we're industry specialists, and so we've always studied. The company was founded in the early '60s. We've been focused on these industries forever, and so we tend to look at it from the financial side, but that's where our focus is always.
So how does Reaves fit in within the infrastructure industry, and how do you work with some of the more traditional designers, contractors, and people like that?
We manage portfolios for a variety of different constituents, and you really just like to gather information, learn as much about the industry as we can. We meet with regulators probably most often. We really just try to learn how certain projects are built, how they fit in to the existing system, especially on the power sides. How do you integrate solar power with gas and coal and nuclear and things like that? So it's really comes from an industry understanding standpoint.
Can you briefly describe maybe a client or two or a project or two that would be an example of kind of what you do?
We don't actually invest in individual projects. So we're public equities managers. So maybe that's something a little different than what you're looking for there. I mean, I think we pay close attention to really all the big projects that are going on. I mean, one that's been in the news recently is the nuclear construction plan at renewable for Southern Company. They've had their COVID issues and delays and different cost overruns and stuff like that. But we try to meet with maybe some consultants who can give some local expertise on how costs are trending, timeline, likeliness of landing on timeline and stuff like that. And that's probably been the biggest single project, at least in the utility industry, over the last decade or so, and it's certainly been on our radars.
What's your opinion of the new infrastructure law, and how will it help the industry?
It's really hard to pass an infrastructure bill, and just actually getting one over the finish line seems like a big accomplishment. But what's pretty interesting in it is, certainly the just the amount of money available. Obviously you have all the road building and stuff like that, and I think that should be good for a lot of the construction businesses that are involved in those industries. But the specific money set aside for water pipelines, for grid resilience, for electric vehicle charging stations, and even the focus on electric transmission, all that is pretty interesting. And I think, how that fits in with the bill currently being talked about with all the potential tax credits and renewable investment tax credits, stuff like that, are certainly interesting. I think the broadband provisions are really pretty interesting as well, because I think the big cable companies probably aren't interested in going out to the rural areas to hook up a few customers with high-speed internet. And so being able to have this money and do that on a municipal basis, I think really improves an area that otherwise probably wouldn't get high-speed broadband. So, all in, I think what it means is that there's going to be an absolute ton of work for a long time, and laying down fiber, maybe laying down broadband, building transmission lines, eventually building renewable energy. I think there's a big backlog of potential new wind and solar and battery plants that will be put in once transmission congestion is removed a lot. So it's kind of an under highlighted part of the bill, but just the focus on transmission and kind of clearing that backlog, I think opens up a whole lot of other work eventually.
You talked about broadband, but is there perhaps another part of the bill that maybe doesn't get as much attention or news that you think is very important?
Yeah, I think the provision on water is really pretty interesting. It's I think it's 55 billion or so set aside for it. Yeah, and it probably comes from stories like Flint, where they had the lead pipe contamination and stuff like that. But generally, I think we have a huge problem where the United States water pipelines have an average age of about 100 years. It's if you look at what your water came through, you'd be pretty disgusted, I think. And it's not from lack of trying. I mean, I think many municipalities just really don't have the financial capacity to dig up Main Street and put in new water pipelines. Chances are they're not even entirely sure where all the water pipelines are located. So in recent years, many of these smaller municipal systems have been sold to bigger publicly traded water companies who have the financial flexibility to be able to go and repair those things. But now with this bill, I think you have the potential for municipalities to be able to do it on their own. And I think what that leads to is a very quick improvement in kind of water quality across the country. And there's probably huge health impacts from that. But I've seen a couple pictures of 80 or 90-year-old pipelines that companies have taken out of the ground, and you have a diameter like this that gets down to this with all the gunk around the outside. It's pretty disgusting. So it's something that'll be great and really have plenty of health benefits for a long time.
So what should our engineering audience be thinking about in terms of how this law will affect them and how they can use it to their benefit?
I think how it'll affect them is they're going to be busy for a long time. I think it might take, as with any government funding of stuff, it might take a year or so for projects to really get off the ground. But if you have this in combination with some of the potential tax credits that are being talked about currently, I think you have decades of demand for big projects building and really complex situations. Laying fiber out to rural areas is it's complex to figure out how much to do, how much to charge, how can you actually earn a return on it. Adding in 50% or higher renewable energy when you need power 24/7, no matter what, is an incredibly complex situation. And then adding in a new source of demand with electric vehicles, having different voltages, smaller systems that probably can't handle, in a given neighborhood, you probably can't handle 5 electric vehicles charging at the same time on a high-speed charger. So, figuring out the solutions to all of that, really complex problems, and then actually doing the work is setting up to be just a very busy time for engineers for a long time. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like even if you just look at like the stock market reactions, like, a lot of the construction companies have, skyrocketed. And generally, utilities haven't really performed as well as some other stocks, even though, I think this bill, helps out. Utilities don't necessarily earn more money because they're regulated, but it certainly gives them a lot of potential growth and that seems to have been missed. I thought it was a pretty positive bill, at least from the power industry standpoint. But in terms of, I guess it's more of a stock market financial impact, maybe a trading opportunity for anything. But it's, I think, the tax credit bill might be more impactful, especially from a stock market perspective. But certainly, it's nice to see an infrastructure bill pass. I feel like every president in the last 10 has promised one, and of course it's impossible because it's local. And, local. It's a local bill for national politics. There's no words, right? Definitely excited to see what all the activity that comes out of it.